The blood on Clara Newman's hands had barely dried when she heard the desperate pounding on her door at midnight, and she knew without asking that another life was about to enter the harsh world of Riverton, Wyoming. She had delivered every baby born in this wind-scraped county for the past 7 years, ever since she arrived in 1873 as a 20-year-old widow with nothing but her midwifery training and a determination to be useful. Now, at 27, she could navigate a breech birth in the dark and knew the sound of a woman's labor pains better than she knew her own heartbeat. "Miss Newman." The voice outside was male, rough with panic. "Please, my wife, she's early and something's wrong." Clara was already reaching for her medical bag, her fingers finding the familiar leather handles in the darkness. She had learned long ago not to waste time with vanity when lives hung in the balance. Her dark blonde hair hung in a single braid down her back, and she wore the same practical cotton dress she had been wearing when she delivered the Peterson twins that morning. Sleep was a luxury she rarely enjoyed in full. She pulled open the door to find Jonas Hartley, a sheep rancher from the eastern edge of the county, his face pale in the moonlight. "How far apart are the pains?" she asked, already moving past him toward his wagon. "I don't know, 5 minutes maybe." "Sarah's scared, Miss Newman. She keeps saying something's not right." Clara climbed into the wagon, her mind already running through possibilities. Sarah Hartley was barely 19, and this was her first child. First-time mothers often felt certain that something was wrong, but Clara had learned to trust a woman's instincts about her own body. The 15-mile ride to the Hartley ranch passed in tense silence, broken only by Jonas's occasional curses at the horses to move faster. When they arrived, Clara found Sarah exactly as she had feared. The young woman's face was slick with sweat, her eyes wide with terror, and the bleeding was more than it should be. Clara worked through the night with steady hands and quiet reassurance, fighting against complications that would have killed both mother and child in less experienced hands. By the time dawn painted the Wyoming sky pink and gold, Sarah Hartley held a small but healthy son in her arms, and Clara was washing blood from her hands for the second time in 12 hours. Jonas pressed $3 into her palm as she prepared to leave, more than he could afford but less than she deserved. Clara took it without comment. She had long ago learned that pride was another luxury that had no place in her work. The wagon ride back to Riverton gave her time to feel the exhaustion that she had been holding at bay. Her back ached, her eyes burned, and her stomach reminded her that she had not eaten since yesterday's breakfast. But beneath the weariness was the familiar satisfaction of a life saved, 2 lives actually. This was what she was meant to do, what gave her purpose in a world that had taken so much from her. She was nearly back to town when she saw the horse standing riderless by the side of the road, reins trailing in the dust. Clara's first thought was that someone had been thrown, and she scanned the surrounding prairie for signs of an injured rider. What she found instead was a man sitting with his back against a cottonwood tree, holding a small child in his arms. "Are you hurt?" Clara called out, pulling her wagon to a stop. The man looked up, and she saw that he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. "Not hurt," he said, "but my daughter's burning up with fever and my horse threw a shoe 2 miles back. I was trying to make it to Riverton on foot." Clara was down from the wagon before he finished speaking. She knelt beside him and placed her hand on the little girl's forehead. The child could not have been more than 3 years old, with dark curls plastered to her flushed cheeks. "The fever was high, dangerously so. How long has she been like this?" Clara asked, already reaching for her bag. "Started yesterday evening, got worse through the night." The man's voice was steady, but Clara could hear the fear beneath it. "I'm Fletcher Quinn. This is my daughter, Rosalie." "Clara Newman. I'm a midwife, but I know enough about fevers to help." She pulled out a small bottle of willow bark tincture and a clean cloth. "We need to get this fever down. When did she last take water? She won't drink. Won't eat either." Clara mixed a small amount of the tincture with water from her canteen and coaxed it between the child's parched lips. Rosalie whimpered but swallowed. "Your horse can rest here," Clara said. "Put your daughter in my wagon. I'll take you both into town." Fletcher Quinn stood, and Clara realized he was taller than she had thought, broad-shouldered in the way of men who made their living through hard physical work. He lifted Rosalie with a tenderness that made something in Clara's chest tighten. She had seen many fathers over the years, some caring, some indifferent, but there was something in the way Fletcher held his daughter that spoke of a fierce, protective love. They made the remaining journey in silence, Clara driving while Fletcher sat in the back of the wagon, cradling Rosalie and using a dampened cloth to cool her burning skin. Clara took them directly to her small house on the edge of Riverton, the same house where desperate fathers pounded on her door in the middle of the night. Inside, she had Fletcher lay Rosalie on her own bed while she prepared a proper fever treatment. The little girl's breathing was rapid and shallow, and her eyes fluttered but did not open. Clara worked with the same calm efficiency she brought to every medical emergency, mixing herbs, applying cool compresses, and monitoring the child's vital signs. "Is there a mother I should send word to?" Clara asked as she worked. "No." Fletcher's answer was short, final. "It's just us." Clara did not press. She had learned that everyone in the West carried their share of sorrow and most preferred to carry it in silence. She focused instead on Rosalie, on bringing down the fever that threatened to steal this small life away. The hours passed slowly. Clara sent word to Mrs. Patterson, an older woman who sometimes helped her with patients, asking her to handle any births that might come in the next day or two. Fletcher sat in the chair beside the bed, never moving, never speaking unless Clara asked him a direct question. She learned that he had a ranch about 20 miles north of Riverton, that he raised cattle, that Rosalie was his only child. What she did not learn was what had happened to Rosalie's mother, and she did not ask. By evening, the fever had begun to break. Rosalie's skin was cooler to the touch, and her breathing had eased. Clara convinced Fletcher to eat some of the stew she had warming on the stove, and she sat down for the first time since dawn the previous day. "You saved her," Fletcher said, and his voice was rough with emotion he was trying to hide. "The fever broke on its own," Clara replied, though they both knew this was not entirely true. "She'll need rest and plenty of water for the next few days, no solid food until she asks for it. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to repay me. This is what I do." Clara stood and began cleaning her instruments, a ritual that brought order to the chaos of illness and crisis. "You're welcome to stay here tonight. I have a spare room and Rosalie should not be moved until morning." Fletcher looked like he wanted to argue, to insist that he could not impose further, but exhaustion and relief won out. "Thank you, Miss Newman. Truly." That night, Clara gave up her bed to the sleeping child and her father, and made herself a pallet on the floor of her sitting room. She should have been exhausted enough to sleep immediately, but instead she lay awake, listening to the sounds of another person in her house. It had been 7 years since she had shared her space with anyone. 7 years since her husband had died of cholera on the trail west, leaving her widowed before her 20th birthday. She had grown accustomed to solitude, had even come to prefer it. Her work was her companion. The women and babies of Riverton County were her family. She had never felt the lack of anything more. But now, Lying in the darkness, she could hear Fletcher's quiet movements in the next room, the soft murmur of his voice as he checked on Rosalie, and she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. Not loneliness exactly, but an awareness of what her life lacked. A home that was more than just a place to sleep between emergencies. A child's laughter. A man's steady presence. She pushed the thoughts away and finally fell into an uneasy sleep. When she woke at dawn, she found Fletcher already up, sitting at her small kitchen table with Rosalie in his lap. The little girl was awake, her fever gone, demanding water in a hoarse voice that made her father smile with relief. "She's asking for breakfast," Fletcher said when he saw Clara. "I told her we needed to ask the nice lady who helped her feel better." Clara smiled at the child and prepared some warm broth with a little bread soaked in it, easy for a recovering patient to digest. Rosalie ate it slowly, leaning against her father's chest, and Clara felt that strange tightening in her chest again. "I should get back to my ranch," Fletcher said after Rosalie had eaten. "I've got cattle that need tending, and I've already taken too much of your time." "Your horse still needs a new shoe," Clara pointed out, "and Rosalie should rest another day at least. I can drive you to the livery stable, and you can send word to your ranch if there's someone who can handle things for a day or two." Fletcher hesitated, then nodded. "I've got 2 hands who can manage. You're right, I should not rush her recovery." They made their way to the livery stable, where Fletcher arranged for his horse to be reshod and sent a message to his ranch hands via a young boy who did errands for pocket change. Clara found herself inviting Fletcher and Rosalie back to her house for the rest of the day, telling herself it was purely for medical reasons, that she wanted to monitor the child's recovery. But as the day wore on, she had to admit there was more to it than that. She watched Fletcher play gentle games with Rosalie to keep her entertained while she rested, saw the way he braided his daughter's hair with unpracticed but patient hands, heard the stories he told her about the ranch and the horses and the wide Wyoming sky. And she felt something growing inside her that she had thought was long dead. She wanted this. Not just any child, but a child of her own. Not just any man, but someone who would look at her the way Fletcher looked at Rosalie, with that fierce, unwavering love. That evening, as Rosalie slept peacefully in Clara's bed, Fletcher helped Clara prepare dinner. It was a simple meal, nothing fancy, but there was something intimate about working side by side in the small kitchen, about the way he anticipated what she needed before she asked. "Can I ask you something?" Fletcher said as they sat down to eat. "Why does a woman with your skills work alone in a place like Riverton? You could go to a big city, work in a hospital, have nurses to help you." Clara considered her answer carefully. "I came here with my husband. He died before we even reached Riverton. I thought about turning back, going home to Boston, but there was nothing there for me anymore, and Riverton needed a midwife. Every place needs someone who can help bring new life into the world. I'm sorry about your husband. It was a long time ago. I've made a good life here." Clara paused, then asked, "What about Rosalie's mother?" Fletcher's face went still, and Clara immediately regretted the question. But after a moment he spoke. "She died when Rosalie was born, childbirth complications. There was no midwife, no doctor, just me and a ranch hand who had delivered a few calves. We did our best, but it was not enough." Clara's heart broke for him, for the little girl who would never know her mother, for the young woman who had died bringing life into the world. "I'm so sorry, Fletcher. It's why I was so scared when Rosalie got sick. I can't lose her too. She's all I have left of Marie, all I have left of anything that matters." They finished their meal in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who understand each other's pain. The next morning, Fletcher insisted on returning to his ranch. Rosalie was fully recovered, chattering happily and begging to go home to see the horses. Clara packed some of her herbal remedies and gave Fletcher careful instructions on what to do if the fever returned. "I owe you more than I can ever repay," Fletcher said as he prepared to leave. "If you ever need anything, Miss Newman, anything at all, you send word to the Quinn Ranch." "I'm just glad Rosalie is well," Clara replied. She watched them ride away, Fletcher on his newly shod horse with Rosalie secure in his arms, and felt an unexpected emptiness when they disappeared from view. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. Clara delivered the Harris baby 3 days later, a straightforward birth that required none of the drama of the Hartley delivery. She treated Mrs. Chen's infected wound, helped set young Timothy Morrison's broken arm, and answered the door at all hours to desperate voices needing her help. But in the quiet moments, she found herself thinking about Fletcher Quinn and his daughter. She wondered how they were managing, whether Rosalie was staying healthy, whether Fletcher had found someone to help him care for the girl while he worked the ranch. She told herself it was professional concern, nothing more. 2 weeks after Rosalie's recovery, Clara was returning from a birth on the western edge of the county when she encountered Fletcher in town. He was loading supplies into a wagon, and Rosalie was with him, healthy and bright-eyed. "Miss Newman," Rosalie called out when she spotted Clara, waving enthusiastically. Fletcher turned and his face lit up with a smile that made Clara's heart skip. "We were hoping to run into you," he said. "Rosalie has been asking about the nice lady who made her feel better." Clara knelt down to Rosalie's level. "I'm so glad to see you looking so well. Are you being good for your father?" "I'm very good," Rosalie said seriously. "Papa says I'm the best helper on the whole ranch." "I'm sure you are." Clara stood and found Fletcher watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Would you consider coming to dinner at the ranch this Sunday?" he asked. "It's the least I can do to properly thank you for saving Rosalie's life." Clara knew she should decline. She had learned to keep her distance from the families she helped, to maintain professional boundaries. But she found herself saying yes before she could think better of it. Sunday arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze that promised summer was coming to Wyoming. Clara borrowed Mrs. Patterson's horse and rode out to the Quinn Ranch, following the directions Fletcher had given her. The ranch sat in a broad valley with mountains rising in the distance, a modest but well-maintained house surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Fletcher met her at the door, and Clara was struck by how different he looked here, more relaxed, more at home. He gave her a tour of the ranch while Rosalie chattered beside them, pointing out her favorite horse and the new calf that had been born just last week. Dinner was simple but delicious, and Clara found herself laughing more than she had in years. Fletcher told stories about ranch life, about stubborn cattle and clever horses, and Rosalie added her own commentary in the unself-conscious way of children. It felt natural, comfortable, like something Clara had been missing without knowing it. After dinner, while Rosalie played outside within view of the porch, Fletcher and Clara sat together watching the sun set over the mountains. "This is a beautiful place," Clara said. "Rosalie is lucky to grow up here." "I want to give her a good life," Fletcher replied, "but I worry that she needs things I can't provide, a mother's touch, a woman to teach her things I don't know how to teach." Clara chose her words carefully. "She has your love, Fletcher. That's the most important thing any child can have." "Maybe, but there are nights when she cries for her mother, even though she never knew Marie, and I don't know what to say to comfort her." They sat in silence for a moment, then Fletcher turned to face her. "Can I be honest with you, Clara? I did not invite you here just to thank you. I invited you because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day you saved my daughter's life. And I wanted to see if what I felt that day was real or just gratitude and relief." Clara's breath caught. She had been telling herself the same thing, that what she felt was just the natural connection between a healer and a patient's family. But sitting here on Fletcher's porch, watching the way the fading light caught in his dark hair, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her, she knew it was more than that. "And what did you decide?" she asked quietly. "That it's real. That I would very much like to see you again, if you're willing." Clara knew all the reasons she should say no. Her work required her to be available at all hours, to travel across the county at a moment's notice. She had built a life that did not have room for romantic entanglements. And yet, looking at Fletcher, she found herself wanting to make room. "I would like that too," she said. Over the following weeks, Fletcher found excuses to come into Riverton, and Clara found herself making the ride out to the Quinn Ranch more often than medical necessity strictly required. They grew to know each other slowly, carefully. Two people who had both lost too much to rush into anything without thought. Clara learned that Fletcher had come to Wyoming 5 years ago with his wife, Marie, full of dreams of building a life in the West. Marie had been a city girl, the daughter of a Philadelphia merchant, and she had struggled with the harsh realities of ranch life. But she had loved Fletcher, and she had been determined to make it work. When she became pregnant, they had both been overjoyed, never imagining that joy would turn to tragedy. Fletcher learned that Clara had married her husband, William, when she was barely 18, and that they had planned to start a new life in California. William's death had shattered those plans, but Clara had discovered that she was stronger than she knew. Her midwifery training, which she had pursued simply because it interested her, had become her salvation and her purpose. They were both survivors, both people who had learned to live with loss. And perhaps that was why they understood each other so well. One evening in late June, Clara was at the Quinn Ranch helping Rosalie make a flower crown from prairie wildflowers when Fletcher asked if she would like to stay for supper. It had become a common occurrence, these casual invitations that were starting to feel less casual and more like something permanent. After Rosalie had been put to bed, Fletcher and Clara sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars come out over the Wyoming prairie. "I need to tell you something," Fletcher said, and there was a seriousness in his voice that made Clara turn to look at him. "I'm falling in love with you, Clara. I think I have been since the day you saved Rosalie's life, and I need to know if there's any chance you might feel the same way." Clara's heart was racing, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I do feel the same way, Fletcher, but I need you to understand what a life with me would mean. My work does not stop. I could be called away at any hour, sometimes for days at a time. I've delivered babies in snowstorms and during droughts, in the middle of the night and the middle of important moments. If you're looking for a woman who will always be here, who can make your ranch her whole world, I'm not that woman." Fletcher reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I'm not asking you to give up your work, Clara. I've seen what you do, how many people depend on you. I would never ask you to choose between your calling and me. What I'm asking is whether you could see a future where both things exist, where you continue to be the midwife this county needs, but you also have a home here with me and Rosalie. And when I have to leave in the middle of the night, when I miss dinners and birthdays and important days because someone needs me, then I'll keep dinner warm, and we'll celebrate birthdays late, and I'll teach Rosalie that her mother is doing important work that saves lives. Clara, I'm not some fragile man who needs a woman to wait on him. I ran this ranch alone before I met you, and I can keep running it. What I can't do is imagine not having you in my life." Clara felt tears sting her eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. She had spent so long believing that her work meant she had to be alone, that she could not have both a calling and a family. But here was Fletcher, offering her both. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I can see that future. I want that future. Fletcher pulled her close and kissed her, and it was like coming home after a long journey. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Clara was laughing. "What's funny?" Fletcher asked, smiling. "I just realized that I spent 7 years delivering everyone else's babies, helping other people build their families, and I never let myself imagine having one of my own. And now here you are, offering me exactly what I did not know I wanted. Does that mean you want more children?" "Because I have to admit, the idea of filling this house with little ones sounds pretty good to me." Clara's heart swelled. "I do want that. Very much." They sat together under the stars, making plans and dreaming dreams until the late hour forced Clara to make the ride back to Riverton. But before she left, Fletcher asked her one more question. "Will you marry me, Clara Newman? Will you be my wife and Rosalie's mother and keep right on being the finest midwife Riverton County has ever seen?" "Yes," Clara said, and she kissed him again to seal the promise. They were married in early August at the small church in Riverton, with half the town in attendance. Clara wore a simple blue dress, and Rosalie stood beside her with a basket of wildflowers, proud of her role in the ceremony. Fletcher looked at Clara like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever prayed, and Clara felt her heart so full of happiness she thought it might burst. The wedding night was spent at the ranch, and for once Clara did not worry about who might come knocking on her door. She had arranged for Mrs. Patterson to handle any emergencies that arose, and she gave herself permission to simply be a new bride, reveling in the love of a good man. Fletcher was patient and gentle, mindful of the fact that it had been years since Clara had been with anyone. They came together with a tenderness that gradually built to passion, and when Clara finally fell asleep in Fletcher's arms, she felt more at peace than she had since she was a girl. Married life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Clara continued her work as a midwife, and Fletcher continued running his ranch. Rosalie thrived with a mother's care, and Clara discovered that she loved being a parent almost as much as she loved her medical work. She taught Rosalie letters and numbers, told her stories, braided her hair in the mornings, and kissed away her tears when she fell and scraped her knees. But Clara also continued to answer every call for help, riding out at all hours to deliver babies and tend to the sick. Fletcher never complained when she had to leave in the middle of dinner, or when she was gone for 2 days delivering a difficult birth. He simply kept things running at the ranch and welcomed her home with warm embraces and updates on what she had missed. In October, Clara began to suspect that she might be pregnant herself. She waited until she was certain before telling Fletcher, wanting to be sure this miracle was real. When she finally shared the news one evening after Rosalie had gone to bed, Fletcher picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "I'm going to be a father again," he said, wonder in his voice. "And this time I'll have you beside me. This time everything will be different. This time we'll both get to see our child grow up," Clara agreed, and they held each other close, thinking of Marie and William, of the loves they had lost and the love they had found. Clara continued working through her pregnancy, though she began to train Mrs. Patterson more thoroughly, preparing for the time when she would need help. The women of Riverton County were both excited and worried for her. They wanted their midwife to be happy, but they also knew how much they depended on her. "Don't you worry," Clara assured Mrs. Garrett when she delivered her 4th child in January. "I'll still be here when you need me. I'm just going to have some extra help for a while." The winter was harsh that year, with snow piling high and temperatures dropping low enough to freeze water in the well. Clara was 7 months pregnant when she got a call to attend a birth 15 miles away in the middle of a blizzard. Fletcher tried to convince her not to go, but they both knew she had to try. "I'll drive you," he said finally, "and I'm not taking no for an answer." They bundled up against the cold and set out in the wagon, with Clara giving Fletcher directions through the swirling snow. It took them 3 hours to make the journey, and by the time they arrived, Clara was chilled to the bone despite her layers of clothing. But she pushed past her discomfort and delivered a healthy baby boy to Mary and John Stevens, a young couple who were so grateful they cried. Fletcher stayed close the entire time, keeping the fire stoked and making sure Clara did not overexert herself. On the journey home, as dawn was breaking and the snow had finally stopped, Fletcher said, "I know I promised not to ask you to give up your work, and I won't break that promise. But Clara, please, when the baby comes, take some time to rest. Let Mrs. Patterson handle things for a few weeks. I need to know you'll be safe." Clara leaned against his shoulder, exhausted and aching but satisfied with the night's work. "I promise. When our baby comes, I'll take time to heal and to be a mother. Mrs. Patterson is ready to step in." Their son was born on a warm April day in 1875, after a labor that Clara navigated with the practiced calm of someone who had attended hundreds of births. Fletcher was beside her the entire time, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. When she finally held their baby in her arms, Clara felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. They named him Frederick, after Fletcher's father, and he was a healthy, loud baby who demanded attention and gave love freely. Rosalie was thrilled to be a big sister and wanted to help with everything, from changing diapers to singing lullabies. Clara kept her promise to Fletcher and stayed home for 6 weeks after Frederick's birth, letting her body heal and bonding with her new son. But she also kept her promise to the women of Riverton County, and when Mrs. Patterson sent word that she needed help with a complicated delivery, Clara went, bringing Frederick with her and nursing him between contractions. Life at the Quinn Ranch was full and busy and sometimes chaotic, but it was also filled with love. Clara would never forget the lonely years after William's death, the years when she had convinced herself that work was enough, that purpose could replace family. But now she had both, and she treasured every moment. One evening in late summer, when Frederick was 4 months old and sleeping soundly, Clara and Fletcher sat on the porch watching Rosalie chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Are you happy?" Fletcher asked, pulling Clara close. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Clara replied honestly. "There are still hard days, days when I'm exhausted and pulled in too many directions. But then I come home to you and the children and everything makes sense. I feel the same way. Before I met you, I was just surviving, just getting through each day for Rosalie's sake. But now I'm living again. You brought light back into this house, Clara. You brought love back into my life." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Clara said, "I've been thinking about something. There are so many women in this county who have difficult births, who lose babies or nearly lose their own lives. I want to start teaching other women basic midwifery skills, so there are more people who can help when I can't be everywhere at once." Fletcher considered this. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. You could hold classes here at the ranch, or in town if that's easier. I was thinking here would be better. That way I can still be with Frederick while I teach, and maybe some of the women could bring their children, make it a community thing. Whatever you need, I'll support you." Clara started her midwifery classes that fall, teaching a dozen women the basics of childbirth, infection prevention, and emergency care. Some of the students were young women hoping to help in their own communities. Others were mothers who wanted to be better prepared for future births. Clara found that she loved teaching almost as much as she loved the actual work of midwifery. The years passed in a blur of births and seasons, of watching Rosalie grow into a confident, kind young girl, and Frederick develop into a curious, energetic toddler. Clara continued her work, now with a network of trained assistants spread across the county. Fletcher's ranch prospered, and they were able to hire more hands, which gave Fletcher more time to spend with his growing family. In the spring of 1877, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no surprise, just quiet joy. Frederick was 2 years old and ready to give up his position as the baby of the family, though he did not know it yet. "Another baby," Rosalie said when they told her the news. She was 8 years old now, and she had been helping Clara with her midwifery work, learning the family trade. "I hope it's a sister this time. Frederick needs someone to balance him out." "We'll love whatever God gives us," Clara said, though privately she was hoping for a daughter too. Their second daughter, Catherine, was born in November during the first snowfall of the season. She came quickly, born in the early morning with just Fletcher in attendance. He had learned so much from watching Clara work over the years that he knew exactly what to do, and when Clara handed him their daughter to hold while she delivered the afterbirth, the look on his face was one of pure wonder. "2 daughters now," he said softly. "I'm the luckiest man in Wyoming." "3 children," Clara corrected, nodding toward where Rosalie was peeking around the doorway, eager to meet her new sister. Fletcher's face softened even more. "You're right. 3 children. Rosalie was the first, and she'll always be just as much yours as Frederick and Catherine are." Rosalie heard this and ran into the room, careful not to jostle the bed but desperate to be close. "Can I hold her, Mama?" she asked Clara, and Clara's heart swelled at the name Rosalie had started using shortly after the wedding but which still moved her every time she heard it. "Of course, sweetheart. Sit in the chair and I'll hand her to you." Watching Rosalie hold baby Catherine, seeing the love and pride on her face, Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. These were her children, all 3 of them, and this was her family. She had spent so many years helping other women experience this joy, never believing she would have it for herself. And now here it was, more beautiful than she had ever imagined. Life with 3 children was demanding, but Clara had never been afraid of hard work. She continued her midwifery practice, though she was more selective about which calls she answered personally and which she delegated to her trained assistants. Mrs. Patterson had become quite skilled, and several of the younger women Clara had trained were now attending births on their own. Fletcher was an involved father, changing diapers and walking the floor with crying babies without complaint. He taught Rosalie to ride and rope cattle, skills she took to with enthusiasm. He read stories to Frederick and Catherine at bedtime, doing different voices for all the characters, until they were giggling uncontrollably. One day in the summer of 1879, Clara was in town picking up supplies when she encountered Sarah Hartley, the first patient she had remembered thinking about on the day she met Fletcher. Sarah was now a mother of 3, her oldest son nearly 6 years old. "Miss Newman, or I suppose it's Mrs. Quinn now," Sarah said with a warm smile. "I heard you had another baby. Congratulations." "Thank you, Sarah, and congratulations to you on your 3rd. How are you feeling?" "Tired but happy. You know how it is." Sarah paused, then said, "I never got a chance to properly thank you for what you did the night my first was born. Jonas told me later that we both would have died if not for your skill. You gave me my life, Miss Clara. You gave me the chance to have all 3 of my children, to build a family with Jonas. I think about that every day." Clara felt her eyes mist over. This was why she did what she did, why she answered calls in the middle of the night and rode through blizzards and pushed herself past exhaustion. Not for thanks or recognition, but for moments like this, knowing that her work had rippled out into the world in ways she could never fully see. "You're very welcome, Sarah. I'm just glad I was there when you needed me." As Clara drove the wagon home to the ranch, her supplies loaded in the back, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that night 7 years ago when Jonas Hartley had pounded on her door. She had been alone then, married to her work, convinced that was enough. And it had been enough in its way. But this life she had now with Fletcher and the children, this was more than enough. This was abundance. This was joy. She arrived home to find Fletcher teaching Frederick how to groom one of the horses, while Catherine toddled around the barnyard under Rosalie's watchful eye. The sight made Clara smile, and she sat in the wagon for just a moment, taking it all in. Fletcher looked up and saw her, and his face lit up the way it always did when she returned from town or from a birth. He handed the grooming brush to Frederick and came to help her down from the wagon. "Welcome home," he said, and kissed her softly. "It's good to be home," Clara replied, and she meant it with her whole heart. That evening, after the children were in bed, Clara and Fletcher sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the past 4 years of marriage. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the coming night. "You ever miss Boston?" Fletcher asked. "The life you might have had if things had turned out differently?" Clara considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I think about it, about the girl I was before I came west. She had such specific ideas about what her life would look like, what happiness should be. But that girl died with William on the trail, and someone new took her place. Someone stronger, someone who found purpose in helping others. And then that woman met you, and she discovered she could have even more than just purpose. She could have love and family and everything she thought she had lost. No regrets then. Not a single one. You." Fletcher pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "My only regret is the years I wasted thinking I could never love again after Marie. I wish I had known sooner that it was possible to honor her memory and still build a new life." "Marie would want you to be happy," Clara said gently. "Just like William would want me to be happy. They would both want us to love again, to raise our children with joy instead of sorrow. You're right, and I think they would be proud of the life we have built together." They sat in peaceful silence as the stars began to emerge, one by one, in the darkening sky. Clara thought about all the babies she had delivered over the years, all the lives that had begun under her care. She thought about Rosalie, who was learning to be a healer like her mother. She thought about Frederick and Catherine, growing up strong and loved, and she thought about Fletcher, the cowboy single father who had made her want a family of her own. "I love you," she said, the words simple but filled with everything she felt. "I love you too," Fletcher replied. "More than I can ever say." In the fall of 1880, tragedy struck Riverton when an influenza outbreak swept through the county. Clara worked around the clock, doing everything she could to help, but the sickness was brutal and indiscriminate. Several people died, including Mrs. Patterson, who had been Clara's closest colleague and friend. Clara grieved deeply for the older woman who had supported her work for so many years. But she also knew that the best way to honor Mrs. Patterson's memory was to continue the work they had started together. She intensified her training program, teaching more women the skills they would need to help their communities. Fletcher supported her through her grief, taking on extra duties with the children and the household so Clara could focus on fighting the outbreak. Rosalie, now 11 years old, was a tremendous help, caring for her younger siblings and even assisting Clara with some of her less critical patients. When the outbreak finally subsided in late November, Clara was exhausted but grateful that her own family had been spared. She took a week off from all work, spending the time with Fletcher and the children, recovering her strength and her spirit. On Thanksgiving Day, as they sat around the table laden with food, Fletcher asked each person to say what they were thankful for. Rosalie was thankful for her family and her horse. Frederick was thankful for cookies, which made everyone laugh. Catherine, not quite 3, simply said, "Mama, Papa," which made Clara tear up. When it was Clara's turn, she looked around the table at the faces she loved most in the world. "I'm thankful for second chances," she said. "For the chance to love again after loss, for the chance to be a mother after thinking I never would be, for the chance to build a life that is even better than any I imagined when I was young." Fletcher reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm thankful for the day my daughter got sick," he said, "because it brought you into my life. I'm thankful for every moment since then." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. In 1882, Clara delivered her 1,000th baby, a milestone that the women of Riverton County celebrated with a party in her honor. In 1883, Fletcher expanded his ranch, buying additional land and increasing his herd. In 1884, Rosalie turned 15 and announced that she wanted to become a full midwife like Clara, formally apprenticing with her mother. Clara could not have been more proud. She began training Rosalie in earnest, taking her to births and teaching her everything she knew. Rosalie had a natural gift for the work, a calm presence that put laboring women at ease and steady hands that could handle emergencies without panic. In the spring of 1885, Clara discovered she was pregnant for the 4th time. She was 32 years old now, and while she had not been planning for another child, she welcomed this new life with open arms. 4 children, Fletcher said, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "We're going to need a bigger house. Or the children will just have to learn to share," Clara teased. Their 4th child, another son they named Francis, was born in January of 1886 during a cold snap that froze everything solid. He was a winter baby, born with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to the world, and Clara fell in love with him instantly, just as she had with all her children. Frederick, now almost 11, took his role as big brother seriously, helping watch over baby Francis and teaching him things only a big brother could teach. Catherine, at 6, was delighted to have a baby to fuss over. And Rosalie, now 17, helped Clara recover from the birth, putting into practice everything she had learned. "You're going to be an excellent midwife," Clara told Rosalie one evening as they worked together preparing herbal remedies. "You have the skill and the compassion needed for this work." "I learned from the best," Rosalie replied, and Clara felt her heart swell with pride. That summer, Rosalie attended her first birth completely on her own. Clara went with her but stayed in the background, only there to intervene if necessary. She was not needed. Rosalie handled the delivery with confidence and skill, bringing a healthy baby girl into the world and ensuring the mother was comfortable and safe. "How does it feel?" Clara asked as they rode home together, the sunrise painting the prairie in gold. "Like I did what I was meant to do," Rosalie said. "I understand now why you love this work so much. It's not just a job, it's a calling." "Yes," Clara agreed. "It's exactly that." In 1887, Fletcher was elected to the county council, a position he had not sought but accepted when his neighbors insisted. He used his position to advocate for better medical care in rural areas, for training more midwives and bringing a doctor to Riverton. His efforts bore fruit when Dr. Samuel Hughes, a young physician from Chicago, opened a practice in town in early 1888. Clara welcomed Dr. Hughes, seeing him not as competition but as a colleague. They worked together on difficult cases, combining her practical experience with his medical school training. The partnership benefited everyone in Riverton County. One evening in the fall of 1888, Clara and Fletcher took a rare evening to themselves, leaving the children in Rosalie's capable care. They rode out to a high meadow on the ranch property, a place they had discovered years ago and returned to whenever they needed to talk or simply be together. "You realize we've been married for 13 years?" Fletcher asked as they sat together on a blanket, watching the sunset. 13 wonderful years, Clara replied. "Though they've passed so quickly, sometimes it feels like yesterday that we met, and sometimes it feels like we've always been together." "I know what you mean. I can barely remember what life was like before you." Fletcher paused, then said, "I've been thinking about the future. Frederick is 12 now, old enough to start learning the ranch business seriously. Rosalie is almost ready to take over your midwifery practice. Catherine and Francis are growing up so fast. Before we know it, they'll all be grown and starting lives of their own." "Don't remind me," Clara said with a laugh that was tinged with sadness. "I want to keep them small forever. We can't do that, but we can make sure they have good foundations. Strong values, good educations, skills they can use to build their own lives." Fletcher turned to face her. "And when they're grown and gone, it will just be you and me again. What do you want our life to look like then?" Clara thought about it. "I want to still be working, but maybe less intensely. Training the next generation of midwives instead of attending every birth myself. Spending more time here at the ranch with you. Maybe traveling a bit, seeing some of the places we've always talked about. Growing old together and watching our grandchildren grow up." "That sounds perfect to me," Fletcher said, and he kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon. The next few years passed in a blur of family life and work. Frederick proved to be a natural rancher, taking to cattle work with enthusiasm. Catherine discovered a love of teaching and began helping at the small school in Riverton. Francis, the baby, was a charmer who could talk his way out of any trouble. And Rosalie established herself as one of the most skilled midwives in Wyoming, working alongside Clara and eventually taking over many of her mother's responsibilities. In 1892, Rosalie married a young rancher named Thomas Miller, and Clara felt both joy and sadness watching her daughter start a new life. The wedding was held at the Quinn Ranch, with half the county in attendance, and Clara could not stop crying happy tears. "She'll be fine," Fletcher whispered during the ceremony. "You raised her to be strong and capable. She's ready for this." "I know," Clara whispered back. "I'm just not ready to let her go." But of course, Rosalie did not go far. She and Thomas built a house just 5 miles from the Quinn Ranch, and she continued her midwifery work. Within a year, Rosalie was pregnant with her first child, and Clara had the profound joy of delivering her own grandchild, a healthy boy named after Fletcher. Holding her grandson for the first time, Clara felt the circle of life complete itself. She had brought so many babies into the world, had helped so many women experience the joy of motherhood. But nothing compared to this, to seeing her own daughter become a mother, to knowing that the family she and Fletcher had built would continue into the next generation. The years of the 1890s brought changes to Riverton. The railroad came through, connecting the small Wyoming town to the wider world. More people moved in, and the town grew from a rough frontier settlement into a proper community. Clara watched it all with satisfaction, seeing the fruits of all the work she and so many others had done to build something lasting. In 1895, Clara turned 42 and decided it was time to officially retire from active midwifery practice. She had trained more than 50 women over the years, and Rosalie was more than capable of handling the county's needs. Clara would still consult on difficult cases and continue teaching, but she would no longer answer calls in the middle of the night or ride through blizzards to reach laboring women. It was harder to let go than she had expected. Her work had defined her for so long, had given her purpose and meaning. But Fletcher was there to help her through the transition, reminding her that she had more than earned her rest. "You've delivered over 1,500 babies," he pointed out. "You've saved countless lives. You've trained an entire generation of midwives. It's time to let them carry on the work while you enjoy the fruits of your labor." And so Clara did. She spent more time at the ranch, more time with Fletcher and the children who were still at home. Frederick was now 20 years old and running much of the ranch operations. Catherine was 16 and studying to be a teacher. Francis was 9 and already showing signs of being as stubborn and independent as his father. Clara discovered that retirement suited her. She loved having time to pursue hobbies she had never had time for before, like gardening and reading and simply sitting on the porch with Fletcher, watching the sunset. She loved being more present for Catherine and Francis, being able to attend school events and help with homework without constantly worrying about being called away. But the best part of retirement was the time she could spend with her grandchildren. Rosalie had 3 children now, and Clara reveled in spoiling them the way grandmothers were supposed to do. She told them stories, taught them about plants and healing, and gave them all the love she had to give. In 1898, Frederick married a sweet young woman named Emma, and they settled on a piece of the Quinn Ranch that Fletcher deeded to them as a wedding present. In 1899, Catherine left for Teachers College in Denver, pursuing her dreams with Clara and Fletcher's full support. And Francis, the baby who would always be the baby no matter how old he got, continued to keep them on their toes with his adventures and mischief. On a warm summer evening in 1900, Clara and Fletcher celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together everyone they loved. The ranch was full of family and friends, of children and grandchildren, of people whose lives Clara had touched through her work over the years. Sarah Hartley was there with her husband and 6 children, the oldest nearly grown. She pulled Clara aside at one point and said, "You know, my Jonah still tells the story of the night you saved my life. He tells our children that they exist because of your skill and courage. We'll never forget what you did for us." Clara hugged her, feeling the weight of a quarter-century of service to this community. "It was my privilege to help you, Sarah, to help all of you." As the party wound down and the guests departed, Clara and Fletcher found themselves alone on the porch, just as they had been so many times before. They were both older now, gray threading through their hair and lines marking their faces. But when Fletcher took Clara's hand, she felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt when he first told her he was falling in love with her. 25 years, Fletcher said. "The best years of my life." "Mine too," Clara replied. "I never imagined I could be this happy, Fletcher. When I was that lonely young widow delivering babies in the middle of the night, I thought that was all my life would ever be. And then you and Rosalie came along and changed everything." "We needed each other," Fletcher said simply. "You saved Rosalie's life, but in a way, you saved mine too. You brought love and light back into a house that had been dark for too long." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling peaceful and content. "I delivered every baby in this county for years," she said softly, "but I never thought I'd have babies of my own. And then a cowboy single father made me want exactly that, made me want a family and a home and all the things I thought I had lost forever." "You have any regrets?" Fletcher asked. Clara thought about it, about the long, hard years of work, about the nights she had spent in cold cabins delivering babies while storms raged outside, about the patience she had lost despite her best efforts, about all the sacrifices she had made. And then she thought about Rosalie's smile, about Frederick's strength, about Catherine's intelligence, about Francis's laughter, about the grandchildren who called her grandmother and climbed into her lap for stories. "Not a single one," she said. "Every hard moment led me here to this life with you. I would not change a thing." They sat together as the stars came out, as they had done 1,000 times before. Two people who had found love after loss, who had built a family out of the ashes of grief, who had created a life more beautiful than either of them had dared to dream. In the distance, Clara could hear the sound of her grandchildren playing, the murmur of Frederick and Emma talking about ranch business, the laughter of Rosalie and Thomas. This was her legacy, not just the babies she had delivered or the women she had trained, but this family, this love, this home. Fletcher kissed the top of her head, and Clara smiled in the darkness. She had spent so many years bringing life into the world, helping other families grow. And in the process, she had found her own family, her own happiness, her own place in the world. The Wyoming wind whispered through the prairie grass, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the promise of tomorrow. Clara Newman Quinn, retired midwife, wife, mother, and grandmother, sat on the porch of her home with the man she loved, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. This was not the life she had planned when she first came west as a grieving widow. But it was the life she had built, one choice at a time, one delivery at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And it was better than anything she could have imagined. As the moon rose over the mountains, casting silver light across the ranch, Clara closed her eyes and offered up a silent prayer of gratitude, for second chances, for healing, for love, for the cowboy who had made her want a family of her own, for the children who had filled her heart and home, for every moment that had led her to this perfect, peaceful now. The future stretched ahead of them, full of grandchildren to spoil and quiet days to enjoy, of watching their children build their own lives and legacies. Clara and Fletcher would face it together, just as they had faced everything for the past 25 years. Hand in hand, heart to heart, partners in every sense of the word, and somewhere in Riverton, a new baby was being born, brought into the world by one of the midwives Clara had trained. The work continued, the cycle of life went on, and Clara smiled knowing that she had played her part well. She had delivered the babies, trained the midwives, and built the family. She had lived a life of purpose and love, of service and joy. As Fletcher led her inside to bed, Clara took one last look at the star-filled Wyoming sky. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new joys, new moments to treasure. But tonight she would sleep in the arms of the man she loved, in the home they had built together, surrounded by the family that was her greatest achievement. This was happiness. This was peace. This was love. And Clara Newman Quinn had found it all in the wild Wyoming West, in the arms of a cowboy single father who had needed her as much as she had needed him. Together, they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every hardship and every tear. And as she drifted off to sleep, Clara's last thought was simple and profound. She had delivered every baby in the county, but the greatest delivery of all was the one she had made to herself, the delivery of a future she had stopped believing in, a family she had stopped hoping for, and a love that had saved her as surely as she had saved so many others. The end of one story, but the beginning of countless others, each generation carrying forward the legacy of love, service, and courage that Clara and Fletcher had built together in the wild Wyoming West.